At 6:38, let's speak to the British boxing promoter Frank Warren, who joins us on the phone. Frank, thanks very much indeed for talking to us. I mean, just how important was this man? How important was Muhammad Ali?
Well, he was important to he obviously was very important to boxing. He was very important to sport. But he was very important as a human being, and he was probably one of the most famous people of the 20th century, even into the 21st century. But he was an iconic figure who stood up for his beliefs. He stood up for his beliefs as far as his race was concerned in America. He fought the government. He went up against the system. They cruelly took away 3 years of his career. He came back after that and regained the title. But during those 3 years were probably, you never know how great, even greater he could have been as far as boxing is concerned. But as a man, you have to admire all what he did. What he did as far as his race, I think transcends anything else. He knew he was born in an era when blacks didn't have votes. He had a lot of prejudice against him. He represented his country in the Olympic Games, won a gold medal, yet still came against the prejudice of the time. But to actually go out there and say this is wrong, to go out and say the Vietnam War was wrong, that I'm not going to fight for a country that treats me and my race the way they do, it was a very, very brave thing to do, especially in that time, in that era. He was fighting the system. And as a champion, he came through. And it was only after that people warmed to him, because prior to that, as a boxer, certainly in America, he was not liked.
You talk about that time of change in American history and world history. How much of that change that we've seen in the decades since do you think could be credited to Muhammad Ali himself? How much difference did he make?
Well, because he was the heavyweight champion of the world, and because of his stance, he obviously highlighted it, and he brought it not only to the attention of probably the younger people in America, but more so to the world. And he was one of the leading lights in doing that. Now, at the time, he made some quite racial remarks himself. He, for example, said that blacks shouldn't marry whites and vice versa. And obviously, over a period of time, his views changed. But that's how he was at the time. And when he joined the Nation of Islam, when he got on board with them, then he turned a lot of people against him. But he stuck to his principles and came through, and at the end became the most loved sportsman in the world and the most recognised, I think, the most recognised person on the planet.
Just looking at these pictures that we're showing this morning, just photo after photo, footage after footage, just every one of them a memorable picture. There's another one there. I mean, it's just, they're the pictures that so many of us grew up with, that so many people will remember. Frank, we're looking at pictures of him in the ring at the moment. If Muhammad Ali hadn't existed, do you think boxing would be very different today? Do you think it maybe wouldn't be the big business, the huge sport that it is today without him?
Well, I think, with his obviously, number one, his boxing ability. He was an Olympic gold medalist, and he came into the sport with a fantastic pedigree. But as a professional boxer, his talents were unlimited. He had great speed, he had great grace, and more importantly, he could talk. He could he could not only talk the talk, he could walk the walk. But he was a very, very dynamic character. He was clever, he was smart. And when you think there's one period he couldn't read or write, he learned himself to read and write. All these things he brought to the sport, and combined it with a change in technology in the way the sport was taken to people. It was the early stages of not pay-per-view. Sorry, when you used to go to the cinemas in the evening and watch things over the satellite. I can remember going into the West End, into cinemas, to watch some of these fights and other fights. He was at the forefront of that technology, combining with sport to turn the sport into the huge thing that it became. And he was, I think, as he said, and I've seen on some of the quotes this morning, that he turned the earning power of the athlete around. I mean, he was earning in those stages huge money. If he was around today in the era of pay-per-view, it would be, it would bust all records. But he was instrumental in changing the way people watched boxing. He was instrumental in the way that athletes found the voice. I think at that time as well, if you go back to the Olympic Games, it was the guys all stood up again for Black America with the Black Power. They did the Black Power salute. That a lot of that emanated from Muhammad Ali, and and if you think back of it, he was the most famous guy from that activist element that brought it to the attention of the public.
Frank Warren, boxing promoter, thank you very much indeed for joining us here on BBC Breakfast as we look back on the life of Muhammad Ali, whose death has been announced in the last hour or so.